All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is March 12, 2025, and we've got a lot to get to today. And I can't say I'm too thrilled with what I have to report. There's some pretty bad news. I was able for over a month really to decenter, if that's the right word, uncenter the plight of the Gazan people at the hands of Israel. Certainly, their situation has not been good under the Trump administration working with Netanyahu. That certainly hasn't been positive or salutary for Palestinians, but at least the bombs haven't been falling, or hadn't been. And I don't know if they are now, but Israel is back to its policy of killing Gazans, and it is terrifying. It is horrific. There is talk going on. There are negotiations. Witkoff, Trump's advisor in the Middle East, is pushing, continues to push both sides to negotiate. And we aren't seeing, all-out hostilities the way we did see for 15 months under Harris Biden. But it is not a good situation. It is not positive in any way for the people of Gaza. So that won't be the only topic, but I really wanted to lead with it today because for folks who wonder, hey, Hal, we're not hearing you talk about Gaza. Why is that? Are things better there? And I've mentioned, at least the bombs aren't falling. To that degree, they're better. But look, right now, the situation is dire. Israel has cut off aid, all humanitarian aid, all food, no supplies, no food, fuel, or medicine is crossing into Gaza. I don't know if they have any farms there, any domestic agriculture at this point. They had in the past, of course, but it's been largely just destroyed, decimated by Israel. And not only that, Israel's been attacking. So I think we saw 8 more dead. I have a headline there. We'll get to it in a little bit. But 8 killed as of yesterday. There was a report over the past 24 hours. Nevertheless, there are negotiations going on with Witkoff in Qatar. So you can, I guess, it's just so horrific. But there does appear to be some commitment from this administration to at least negotiate between Hamas and Israel and the Arab countries. So that is, I guess, better than the alternative that we saw for all that time. On the other hand, of course, Trump is explicit in calling for ethnic cleansing, if not outright genocide. There you can see faces. This is from Al Jazeera, just posted. I want everyone to know exactly where this comes from. Al Jazeera, hungry children in Gaza. And, of course, the main thumbnail for today's program centers kids who are, obviously just starving. It's absolutely horrific. I'll just put that back up there. This is from Al Jazeera, where I got it. They took it from Anadolu Ajansi, the Turkish agency, and you can see those children just absolutely famished. Let me get rid of that. Anyway, 240-242-5646 would love to talk to you. 240-242-5646. And I'm putting this up as well, just the title there, The Love of Money is a Root of All Kinds of Evils. That is a translation from the Bible. I think that's a common version as opposed to the King James Version. And I like it a little better rather than the love of money is the root of all evil. They're saying the love of money is a root. So in this translation, they're not, whoever wrote that translation is saying it's not everything that we can trace, all evil. And obviously, hungry children in a world where there is more than enough food for all is an evil. It's a terrible evil. It's a great, great, great evil. And there, similar slavery, obviously, which continues in the world today. War, endless war. These are terrible, terrible evils that wreak such destruction and havoc. And the point of the quote is not that it's all based on greed. That's why we have these in the first place, because that's what love of money is, right? Greed. You just want to accumulate but that it is a very significant source. So that really was inspired, that using that caption, that quote from the book of Timothy it was inspired by words by another podcaster, one I've talked about before in this program. I have great respect for, Chris Hedges. And there's a lot of Chris H's. There's Chris Hitchens. I think he's dead. I don't like him. There's Chris Hayes. He's not dead. He's on MSNBC. I'm not a big fan of his, although I probably dislike him less than Chris Hitchens, who really, despite, wrapping himself in the mantle of atheism, it was always a huge warmonger. But Chris Hedges is a truly great person and a true humanitarian. You want more Halitics? You don't get your Jones satisfied just from my program? Then go to Facebook and join Halitics on Facebook. And also, don't forget, please click like. Click that thumb going up and down because it really does help us beat the algorithm. And I've heard other hosts say that, so I like that expression. So help us beat the algorithm by clicking like. People liked yesterday's program. We got some nice positive feedback from viewers. From Arlen, he seemed to enjoy it. The numbers were going up. We're starting to climb a little bit. Unfortunately, I got this notice. Was it this early this morning? I don't know if it has the actual. Well, it has the date on it. So the date is today. It must have been this morning. Got this from YouTube. I have never seen this before. This is the first time that they've ever just flat out blocked one of my videos. Now, I very much appreciate that the block does not count as a strike. Apparently, if you get strikes, if you use, DRM, protected works, digital right management protected works, I think maybe music, I'm not really clear. You kind of present somebody else's work as your own, you get a strike. And that's really, really bad. I've never done that. They can say I have no strikes, which is really good. But they did not like the fact that I used the video of Gavin Newsom on his own podcast, the Gavin Newsom podcast with Charlie Kirk. I played clips of it. Now, I don't honestly know. They didn't give me a strike, probably because they recognize it was, there's what they call fair use. And I used it clearly, right? I clearly used that video of Newsom talking to Kirk, clearly used it just to discuss Newsom and his positions and to criticize him. It wasn't as though I said, hey, look at this great video I did with Gavin Newsom or tried to monetize it for myself. None of that. It was to comment. And, I could have fought, and they give you options. I was really intrigued. This is really interesting to me that they do this. You have choices. I could submit a dispute. I could have submitted a dispute, but I didn't think it was worth it. All right, maybe I would have won in the end. I said, hey, this is fair use. And plus, I don't even know why Newsom would have a problem with my using it. Well, it's actually iHeartMedia that produces the Gavin Newsom program. I have no idea why they would have a problem with my using a few clips of him talking about his opposition to trans girls and women. And I always say it that way. I don't say trans athletes and I don't say trans females. I always try to be as specific and accurate with the language as I can. So it's very, very clear what Newsom opposes. And I share his antipathy to this. He opposes trans girls and women competing in women-only sporting events and on women-only teams or girls-only teams. And I think that's right. I do. Now, I understand there's arguments and, I don't want to get into that right now. I don't think that's an unreasonable position. I have big issues with Newsom centering that, making that a big feature of his video with Charlie Kirk, doing a video with Charlie Kirk, and that being the first podcast he's done, inviting Kirk on, not a real progressive, not a lefty, not someone who would challenge Newsom from the left, but rather give Newsom an opportunity to say, hey, look, I'm righty. I'm against the trans and I'm against homeless people. The homeless are cluttering up our streets. It's a huge issue with quality of life, rather than talking about how the Silicon Valley oligarchs have looted the state, are looting the country, are just taking over the world and doing tremendous damage. Instead of talking about that, which would be the appropriate, that's what's really relevant in most people's lives. That's how we are negatively impacted by these policies. I mean, the trans girls and women in sports does have some negative implications for some families. It's true. I don't deny that. It's a zero-sum game. But what the oligarchs do is they're actually taking money out of the system. They're taking money away from poor, struggling, working people. So unlike the trans argument or issue, which I do think is basically a zero-sum game, you can argue, well, no, girls are in danger. Some girls have been injured. It's true. But basically, the question is, will trans girls and women supplant or take the place of some biological girls and women on sports teams? So only so many people can be on a team. If you have a trans athlete, a trans girl, or trans woman athlete, then you have one less bio girl. So that's a zero-sum game. It's kind of the same as affirmative action, really, because when you have spaces set aside or you give preferences to people based on certain characteristics, then you obviously have to take away spaces that would otherwise be available for other folks. So that's a zero-sum game. But what the tech oligarchs do is they're taking away from all of us. They're siphoning off enormous amounts of wealth and treasure from us and putting it in their own pocket. And that is not a zero-sum game. That's a negative or sum game for us and positive for them. That's something that I would have loved to have heard Gavin Newsom discuss. He doesn't come up. And, he's elite. He's wealthy. He's privileged. He's doing really, really well in our society. So his fortunate circumstances and obviously his love of them, right? I mean, he's the governor of California. He has a legitimate shot at becoming president. He's not going to want to upset an apple cart that provides him with such extraordinary privileges. So he lets that very, very toxic, very, very corrupt cart continue to roll over people because it benefits him. That's an example, certainly, of the love of money being a root of evil, a cause of evil. Do want to update you on the situation with Mahmoud Khalil. I almost did, I started the show late today because I got involved in some other activities and I just didn't have enough time to prep. And then I wanted to do, but I, just discuss a lot of issues that needed my time to be ready to discuss. By the way, call me. I'd love to, and talk about discussion, love to talk to you, 240-242-5646. I was downtown Monday afternoon in front of the ICE headquarters. The crowd was relatively small. I was disappointed. It was a modest crowd protesting against the arrest of Khalil. But there have been big crowds in New York. There are crowds outside a courthouse in New York City where there was a hearing, the first hearing on Khalil's detention. He was not there. He's being held in Louisiana. Apparently the judge has not yet, or at least had not yet, ruled when I watched the video around noon whether he was going to, and it's a he was going to order that Khalil be returned to New York City. I think he should be. I think they should be forced to produce him, meaning ICE, the federal government, the Trump administration should be forced to produce him in court, but that apparently the court had not yet decided that. But I believe they had decided, maybe I'm wrong, that the hearings would proceed in New York, in the Southern District of New York, which they should also, because this all happened in Columbia University. It's all based on allegations of wrongdoing by Khalil. By the way, allegations, they're very vague. There's no specific laws that are identified as having been broken, at least as far as I know and that I read. So we've discussed it, but I just wanted to go over what NBC News provides in this little description because it's so wrong. This is fascism. This is what the Nazis did. Wife details arrest of Palestinian. Now, they say as soon as you invoke the Nazis, you lose. We don't have death camps yet, but we are complicit in genocide. As the Nazis committed it, we are clearly very, very deeply implicated in the Israeli genocide in Gaza. So the Nazi analogy does not ring false, does not ring hollow, it does not ring exaggerated whatsoever. And of course, Khalil was arrested because he protested against that genocide. Wave details arrest of Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil as judge blocks deportation. So the judge blocked it. That's good news. And there's just a little bit more. I wanted to really just get in. I didn't play the clip from Fox News from the courthouse. Maybe I haven't. It wasn't that informative. There really wasn't a lot there. It was just, oh yeah, we're standing outside the courthouse. There's a lot of protesters. The court is going to rule on whether Khalil needs to be brought back to New York City and where the hearings will be. But there was no actual decision that was related. So what's the value of talking more about it? But this is really, really scary stuff, in my view. This is terrifying. So yesterday, Khalil's wife said that she and he had returned from an iftar dinner. This is Saturday night, a few days earlier, when they were followed and confronted by ICE agents. So they had broken a fast. The agents told her, they said, go upstairs now or you'll be arrested as well. She did not want to leave her husband's side. I guess at some point they took him away, did not arrest her despite the threat. And she describes it, it's chilling. We were not shown any warrant, and the ICE officers hung up. So she got the phone. Apparently she got her cell phone out, and immediately they had the officer right there. I mean, the lawyer right there. I mean, you can say on speed dial, everyone's on speed dial, but they have the lawyer right there. She hits the line, and the lawyer says, I want to talk to you right now. And they're like, no. Now, they should have for a lot of reasons. And one reason, the agents screwed up big time because they were under the misapprehension that Khalil was on a student visa, which is would afford him far fewer rights, far less process. He should have still have some, but courts keep whittling that back. Had they spoken to the lawyer, he explains, hey, he's got a green card. He's here as a permanent legal resident, which means he has many of the same rights as citizens do. You cannot simply unilaterally take him away. You can't, whatever privileges the government has been given when it comes to, or many of the privileges when it comes to student visa holders do not apply in this case. You cannot deprive him of rights. And the court, the Southern District of New York court, seemed receptive to those arguments, saying you cannot take him away. I'm ordering that he be kept in this country without full due process rights before you can deport him. But he's still in Louisiana. He's still being kept, as far as we know, incommunicado. I don't know that his lawyer has seen him. It's terrible. It's terrifying. And it's illegal. The wife describes that agents whisked him away in an unmarked vehicle. And you see those movies right from the 40s where you'd see Gestapo agents pull up in front of a house and they just troop in. They just pull somebody out, throw them in a car, unmarked car, and drive them away. Watching this play out in front of me was traumatizing. And she says it felt like a scene from a movie I never signed up to watch. So that's America. That's where we live. That's our country. What is our duty? What's our obligation? How do we fight that? I will tomorrow be on the Hill. I was thinking of going down today. I mentioned that I almost didn't do this live show today, or I would have done it even later, perhaps, because there are a lot of protests, rallying, lobbying going on Capitol Hill. And the Democratic lawmakers seem a little bit more receptive to our arguments, to Code Pink arguments, to civil rights activists' arguments against what the Trump administration has done. Some Democrats seem more receptive than they have been in the past when we point out the genocidal activities of the Harris-Biden administration. They've never, with very few exceptions, have shown any inclination or interest in what we have to say. And of course, that includes many very well-known progressives, AOC, Jamie Raskin. They don't care. They don't give. I mean, Rashida Tlaib cares. The rest really don't give a crap. Bernie doesn't seem to care. The wife of Khalil, more from the NBC article, which gives her quite a lot of newsprint, which I think is very, very good. She deserves it. She is a victim, as is her husband, of course, the even greater victim. And she describes what their life has been like because he took on the Israeli lobby, because he took on the architects of genocide, because he took on the state. His life has been ruined. So Mahmoud Khalil's wife says he had been concerned about recent threats and what she described as a targeted doxing campaign against him in recent days, that he requested help from his university, Columbia. I haven't been able to sleep. I fear that ICE or a dangerous individual might come to my home. Please provide me with support. Please intervene. Obviously, Columbia University, a wealthy, powerful institution, they're scared too. But, you know, we have to get over that fear. And that's easy for me to say. You know, no one's going to fire me because I don't have a job. It's easy for me to say to get over that fear, but if I'm threatened with arrest, I don't know what I would do. I really don't. I don't see myself as some bold hero who would, you know, stand up to these evil forces. If it meant my freedom, you know, what freedoms I do have being sacrificed. I don't know. Being fined enormous gobs of money, more than I have, seeing my comfort, my security taken away from me. I don't know that I have the cojones to do that. I'd like to think I do, but I don't feel comfortable saying I do. And Columbia refused to respond, although they have issued a statement saying that they're very troubled by the arrest and they do support the freedom of speech of protesters. That's what the interim president, I think it's a she, I'm not certain, took over from the Egyptian Manouche Shafik, who nobody was very happy with, but the right wing pushed her out because she was supposedly not quite pro-Zionist enough for them. All right, 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. Is Bernie and Al, and Bernie's on this Fighting Oligarchy tour. By the way, please do call if you get a chance. And also, I haven't been looking, but I wonder, there we go, I'm hearing myself. I do see Ari in the chat. Great to see you there, Ari. Love to get your comments as always. And the Palestinian colors are beautiful in the chat. So Bernie's was in Michigan, and he's getting a lot of shade thrown at him from many progressives. Others loving what he's doing. I mean, can't be that much shade because he's getting much bigger crowds, I think, than anybody else. I want to play clips from this because I think there's some real problems with what Bernie said, and also something really instructive that Sean Fain, who is the president of the United Auto Workers, had to say. By the way, did Fain, I guess the UAW did not endorse, correct? They did not endorse Kamala. Here's Fain. First Fain, and then I'll comment, and then Bernie.
It built a life where you could raise a family, you could own a home, you could take your kids to the doctor without having to worry about breaking the bank. You could retire knowing that you would be all right because you had a pension and health care that you earned. And those workers...
Right, so he's just talking about, yeah, obviously, you know, the 60s, 70s, strong unions, jobs with decent benefits. This is the America we should have. This is the America of the past. And he has that Eat the Rich shirt, which again is so ironic. He's standing there with Bernie's not a Democrat, to be very fair to him, but a guy who caucuses with the Democrats, who has run cover for the Democrats. It is somewhat ironic, right? I mean, it seems a little odd that Sean Fain would be so comfortable, I think, on tour with Bernie, given how Bernie has been, of late, certainly a sheep herder, sheepdog for the Democratic Party, keeping those leftist sheep from straying off the Democratic farm, right? He's the sheepdog that keeps those sheep, us, if he can, the leftists, from straying too far. And so for Shawn Fain to be there, I think I'm not thrilled with that. I wish Shawn Fain were standing with Workers Strike Back with the Green Party. But Shawn Fain's got a pretty good job too. I'm sure he's making a couple $100,000 a year. He's pretty privileged. He doesn't have to work on an assembly line. His job isn't at nearly, it's at some risk, but not nearly as much risk as his line workers are. So again, his interests don't align neatly with those of America's workers. Let me play a little more because it's very instructive what he has to say about offshoring jobs.
Just like at a lot of our other plants, have generated billions of dollars in profits for this company for decades. But to a greedy corporation, it's not enough. A few months ago, thousands of those workers were served with an indefinite layoff notice.
So these, I believe, are GM Stellantis. I'm sorry, it is Stellantis. That's what used to be Chrysler. They were given their notice, and he's going to continue to explain.
While Stellantis was laying these workers off, the company was planning on moving good blue-collar jobs to Mexico where they can exploit workers for $3 an hour to make Ram trucks.
Right, so think of how much cheap. $3 an hour versus $20 plus an hour for the GM assembly line. And GM's profitable. It's not like they can't make money paying the workers less. But obviously, they're going to, that's the logic or the quote genius, unquote, of capitalism is you obviously are going to do everything you can to keep your costs as low as possible. I will not condemn, I flat out will not condemn GM management for saying, hey, if we can make the trucks cheaper in Mexico, we're going to do it. And Shawn Fain just told you they can. Much, much cheaper. Much, much more cheaply. So the problem isn't that the greedy managers want to move the company to a place where it can operate more inexpensively. The problem is that the law allows them to. The law provides them with an incentive to do that, right? Because the difference in wages goes right into the pockets of the shareholders and the top managers. The president gets to decide. Well, the president doesn't determine. He does determine, or she determines the salaries to a large degree, but the compensation for the CEO is determined by the board. But the higher the company's profits are, the more money they make, the higher the stock price goes, the greater the compensation package. In fact, often there's a tie. Profits go up, you get a bonus. Well, obviously, the profits will go up if the company pays the workers less, pays less labor costs. That's human nature. We're greedy. We're selfish. We love money. So how do you address that? You make it far less profitable. You take away the profits, the extraordinary profits that come from taking advantage of cheap labor. And the way you do that? Tariffs. It's kind of ironic, isn't it, that Trump has the right policy prescription, and yet this is a rally that's totally attacking Trump. Now, there's good reasons to attack Trump, right? I mean, we just went into the horrible treatment of Mahmoud Khalil. And yeah, I mean, it's not like he's some sort of an ally of labor, but tariffs are the way to stop offshoring. And by the way, Shawn Fain knows that. And he's going to explain that to you in a moment. Right now, in fact.
And then they can ship those trucks back here, right across the border, to America, and they can sell it for the same price. You know, they'll sell them from anywhere from $70,000 to over $100,000 each. You know, when they abuse that cheap labor in Mexico, they sure as hell don't.
All right, he's going to say they don't give us lower prices. So that is so interesting because the entire argument against tariffs, right? The whole argument you keep hearing over and over, oh, it's a tax on consumers. Consumers will have to pay more. You put a tariff on these goods that are brought in from overseas, the price that the consumer will have to pay will go up. But Shawn Fain just told you that when these corporations exploit cheap labor and offshore jobs and lay off American workers, you don't get a price benefit. You don't get lower priced trucks. Your truck costs just as much, whether it's made by $3 an hour workers or by $25 an hour workers. So a tariff is going to have no impact because the cost savings to the company don't lead to lower prices for you. It just means more profit. The tariff will either keep the jobs in this country, which is, of course, what you're hoping for, and that will not mean you have to pay more because they just, they don't lower the prices when labor is cheaper. So that would obviously mean that the tariff isn't going to cause your prices to go up. I hope that's clear. I don't know how super clear that is, but it should be very, very clear. The whole argument against tariffs is that they lead to higher prices because the benefit of tariffs, I think we all understand. If you make imported goods more expensive, then it incentivizes businesses to bring jobs back here, to manufacture here. Because, hey, suddenly we had this great price break on our labor costs when we were making shirts in Haiti, but now that there's tariffs on it, the 60 cents an hour that we pay the women garment workers is offset. The super cheap labor wages we pay are offset by the $5 a shirt we have to pay at the port of Miami when we bring the shirts in from Haiti. So the argument is, well, you have to pay $5 a shirt. That means your shirt will cost you more at Macy's or when you buy it online from Amazon. But no, but that's not the case because what Shawn Fain just said is, and this does make perfect sense, cheap labor doesn't reduce the total price that you pay. The cost of your car doesn't reduce the cost of the item that's brought in from overseas. So raising the cost of labor, which is what tariffs do, won't mean higher prices. Lower labor costs don't mean lower prices. Higher labor costs won't mean higher prices. I hope that's clear. It's really important to understand. What Shawn Fain did is completely destroy the argument against tariffs. You're not going to hear that from Tom Hartman, who's been a champion of tariffs. You don't hear that from Bernie in his speech, who in the past has championed tariffs. You know why? Because they're benefiting from this, the bipolar state we have, where it's either Democrats or Republicans. They're elite. They're privileged people. They are captured in part by their audience, but they also are sheepdogging you into believing that everything the Republicans do is wrong. We have to be united against them. And that serves a lot of benefits, provides a lot of benefits to wealthy people like Hartman, who makes a lot of money from his program, means that his taxes are lower than they would otherwise be, because if we had a sane, rational tax system, people making hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars a year, I don't know if Hartman makes that much, but it makes a lot, they would be paying far higher taxes. They wouldn't be living as large as they do. They wouldn't be able to get, guests on their program who are part of the Democratic Party. And Bernie would become a non-entity in the Democratic Party. I guess he believes he has some leverage. I don't know what it is. But if he stood up and said, yeah, Trump's right on tariffs, and we'll get to another issue where Trump's right and Bernie's wrong in a moment, then Bernie would lose all influence he has in the Democratic Party. And he sure wouldn't get much in the Republican because his policies, Medicare for all, which Democrats don't support, chief among them. And also, yeah, good wages. Those aren't supported by either party either. All right, here's Bernie. And this was really ugly stuff. This was very disappointing from Bernie. We don't have friends. We just don't in government.
No, Mr. President, Zelensky is not a dictator. Vladimir Putin is.
So do you see the way he frames that right away? Oh, we've got a friend. It's totally personalized. Zelensky is not a dictator. Now, there's a lot of evidence that there's a tremendous amount of corruption in Ukraine. Zelensky is pushing a war that is not more and more unpopular, that's leading to his country being destroyed, probably because he's under pressure from the far right, from the neo-Nazis. The Ukrainian military is forcing, is kidnapping people and putting them in service. Maybe he's not a dictator, but he's doing a lot of harm to his country. Again, Bernie personalizing it, trying to compare Zelensky with Putin, which is a comparison that I guess is favorable to Zelensky, rather than saying, hey, what's the smart policy? What's the best policy for us? What's the best policy for Ukraine? What's the best policy for Russia? Obviously, it's peace. But Bernie, at this rally, where he's trying to sheepdog 10,000 people who, by the way, because of the good will that Bernie accumulated over the years by taking on the Democrat Party, by calling, in 2016, he was a vociferous advocate against free trade. By calling for peace, by taking on Bibi, which he did against Hillary. He said Hillary's wrong about Netanyahu. Netanyahu is not our friend. Netanyahu is not our ally. That's what Bernie said in 2016. Builds up a lot of goodwill. Now he decides he's going to use that goodwill up by promoting the Democratic Party rather than a true progressive alternative. It's so disappointing. We have no friends, no allies.
We must not abandon the people of Ukraine who were invaded by Putin.
It's such a false framing. We have left the people of Ukraine out to dry in a horrible war that we've continued to promote, that we prevented a possible peace from blooming 3 years ago. This has been terrible for the people of Ukraine. Bernie's speech here is so wrong-headed, so misguided. Again, they're not our friends. He's leading us down the garden path. He's a misleader, right? He's a misleader at this point.
This country must stand for democracy, not dictatorship.
We must, but we don't. I mean, of course. But what kind of, it sounds good. But our record shows that time after time we support dictators.
And there is another issue that I have worked long and hard on. And that is, as all of you know, there was a terrible attack by Hamas against Israel. 1,200 innocent people were killed.
Bernie does what Kamala always did. When he talks about the genocide, he centers the Israelis who were killed. He centers the Hamas militants who killed them. He doesn't center the 40 times as many, 50 times as many, 60 times as many, 70 times as many Palestinians that Israel killed in its violent unhinged pogroms that were in reprisal. He doesn't bring that up, that are an excuse for a land grab in Gaza. He doesn't center that. That's not the main focus. And, you know, this is in Michigan. This is a state that Kamala lost because she refused to break with Netanyahu in any way, because she refused to put any daylight between herself and Netanyahu, which is exactly, by the way, the policy that Hillary Clinton pursued in 2016, a complete rhetoric. No daylight. She said that, I believe. No daylight between her and Israel in 2016. Didn't work then, didn't work now. Bernie's embracing that same exact, I mean, he's going to say, oh, there's daylight. Oh, no, Israel doesn't get to kill all these civilians. But what does he lead with? And he's got to, because he's bought, paid for, or he's part of a party that's bought and paid for by AIPAC, by the Israeli lobby, by Zionist billionaires. And he can only go so far. He can only step so far over that line, or up to that line.
Israel had a right to respond.
Okay, yeah. I think what did he give you the number of dead Israelis in there? I want to see, because I may have missed part of that, which I wanted. He says there were 1,200 dead. I don't know if we got that in. Let me see if we'll try to see if I can get that, because I want to make sure I get the quote of the total number of innocent, because he uses the word innocent, Bernie does, and it's just flat out dishonest. Let's see if we can get that, because I really want to catch, I really want you to hear this, because it's very, very disappointing. It's disheartening that Bernie is, he just is repeating a false narrative, a false language, because of inequality, because there are too many people who have too much money who support Israel, and that's the problem. So let me see. Here we go. Let's get that.
The terrible attack by Hamas against Israel. 1,200 innocent people were killed. Israel had a right to respond.
1,200 innocent people. You heard him say that. So that was debunked, by the way. I saw a discussion about this on Revolutionary Black Network. Blackout Network. I want to give them props. They helped me with this, the information that I'm imparting to you. So I looked this up. 1,200, those exact words, 1,200 innocent civilians, right? That's what he's saying. So October 7 attacks, actually, there weren't even 1,200. The number kept getting ratcheted down. Total, now it's not like it's okay, right? But let's talk about this stuff honestly. They have to use the biggest numbers possible. They have to get your blood boiling at Hamas and at Palestinians, or else you would just be overcome with grief and rage at Israel and at Harris Biden and at Trump, of course, as we should be, but especially at Harris Biden for supporting this for all those months. Not 1,200 total dead on October 7 by Israel, 1,195. And of that number, 815 have been identified as civilians. So I want to say innocent, right? So they're not military, 815. But well over 300, if I do my math right, were in fact military or police. The people who are repressing, persecuting, oppressing, and killing Gazans and Palestinians. 380 of those killed on October 7 meet that definition. So over 30%, you could say, were Israeli military, Israeli police, the direct oppressors of Palestine. Over 30% who were killed on that date. Since Israel invaded Iraq, The official death count, 48,405. Over 80%, more than 10% more than were killed on October 7 by Hamas. Over 80% of those killed by the Israeli military are innocent civilians. 33%, 1/3 are children. 1/3 of Israel's victims are children. 3% of Hamas victims were children. Remember, you heard, innocent women, they were pregnant women, had children ripped out of their uterus. Apparently that was a false story. Yes, it's horrible what happened on October 7. That's what happens when you oppress and persecute and kill people for generations. They're angry, they're resentful, they're bitter, and they will lash out. And that's exactly what happened. The reprisal, the response by the power, by the empire, was so much worse, so much crueler, and completely indefensible. And Bernie Bernie centered the victimizer. Bernie centered the oppressor. Bernie centered the killer of children. It's horrific. Again, this is not an ally. Was Bernie better than Hillary? Much. Would Bernie be better than Trump? Of course. But Bernie's hardly ideal. Bernie made so many compromises. He did it for, well, let's hear why. This is Chris Hayes. And this really spoke to me. And this speaks, I think, directly to what we see from Bernie and so many other people in our lives, including people I care about. So here we go.
It's a footnote, but a fascinating one, and it gets into your discussion of the Holocaust itself. I think it's Primo Levi you quote about how the real tragedy of the Holocaust, aside from the loss of life, was that it unleashed evil. But at one point, this is you're quoting Gita Sereni's book about one of the survivors. That when the transports came in, as of tomorrow, the transports will be rolling again. And do you know what we felt? We said to ourselves, hurrah, at last we can fill our bellies again. I have a friend who was in Auschwitz at the age of 14, and I asked her that question, how she felt when she saw the transports come in, and she said we were happy because we knew we could eat.
All right, so I thought that was an important segment to play because I want to make some distinctions. To the extent that Hedges and his guest and his guest are saying that those folks who were internally pleased to know that there were more Jews or gypsies or Roma people or other undesirables being brought to Auschwitz who would be killed, who would be murdered by the Sandra Commandos, who were quoted as saying, well, we were glad they were coming in because we would get to eat. They're not guilty of crimes. They're not Nazis. They're human beings who were just desperate to survive. And that's what evil does. That's what the Nazi evil, that's what Hitler, Himmler, Haas did, is they put people in a situation where they were so violated that they would do, or at least be happy about a horrible thing happening. And I think that's kind of how you can understand Hamas, right? And you can understand how the people of Palestine and Gaza felt when they cheered. They said, oh, good, they're being killed, those Jews, those Israelis, because they've done so much harm to us. They made our lives a living hell. So they cheered. And in the case that the anecdote there, the evil that the Nazis did said to these people, okay, well, you're Jews, but you'll get to eat because you're helping us kill your co-religionists, other human beings. So that's what evil does. And how do you avoid that? How do we reduce the likelihood that we will take joy in the certain death of others because it means we'll live, is we have to just completely take that paradigm out of it. Nobody benefits from others' death. We just have to have a world where there aren't those kinds of inequalities in power and wealth between people, between countries. So now, you get a car with a lithium battery, and as I understand it, slave labor that has very short lives mines those batteries, at least in many of them. We have to change that entire dynamic. We don't have massive wealth and income disparities between countries or within them. How we get there, I always vote for Green, because it's not going to help you to vote for Bernie. He ain't going to change that. I mean, plus I would vote for Bernie because I think he would try. But he's the only sort of Democrat, which he isn't really, who will actually work to fight those wealth and income inequalities that put people who are barely surviving in a situation where they're actually pleased that others will die if it means they'll get to eat. All right, here's more. This is really, really interesting what they say about the Nazis and what motivated them.
But what she does, unlike a lot of memoirs of the Holocaust, is she writes about Mengele and the Nazis she works with. And she says precisely what you just said, that people like Mengele have no ideology at all. It was all about careerism and personal advancement and climbing within the system. Have you read the novel The Kindly Ones?
Oh, yes, yeah. Yeah.
What did you think? What did you think of it? I mean, I thought that it was flawed in some ways, but that certainly was the main theme of that book, was careerism.
So people will do harmful things, damaging things, just to advance their careers. And we all see this. It's not as though they were motivated by some bizarre racial ideology. I mean, obviously Hitler was a schizophrenic. He was a nut, clearly. He was off his rocker. So he believed all sorts of crazy, paranoid ideas. But that wasn't the true for many of these others. Like the angel death doctor there, Mengele. Just like, hey, I can make a lot of money here if I'm the guy sitting there at that selection pointing left or right to decide who gets to live and who dies, with almost everyone dying, 80%, 90% dying once they get off that train. That's my that's my meat. That makes me money. The guy who was the commandant of Auschwitz, Rudolf Haas, and they made a movie. There's a movie about him. I saw that. It was based on a book by Martin Amis. It's a good movie. It's a good book. And he said at, I believe, Nuremberg, he said, hey, my family was doing really well. We were living really well in Auschwitz. We had a nice house. We had servants. We had nice clothes. There's all stuff they stole from the victims of the Holocaust. But it helped him with his career. So he just, I'll go ahead and do it. There's a bureaucratic state, and this is one way to advance, and I'll live better, and I'll have more, and I'll be admired by my coworkers, and I'll be above them, and I'll get to issue orders. This is why people will do really, really bad things. This is why people do really, really bad things, and often don't even think about it, don't even recognize they're bad. This is a problem that I have. I feel like I'll pat myself on the back. I feel like I'm less inclined to do bad things. I'm not saying I'm some sort of great person, because I'm really not at all. But I don't like to do things that make me uncomfortable. And I've been privileged enough, fortunate enough in my life that I don't have to do them to eat, to have enough. I have enough. My family has enough, even if I don't do certain things that certain bosses want me to do. And sometimes those are things that are perfectly appropriate. I just don't want to do them. So I'm somebody who is constitutionally capable of saying no on occasion to tasks and jobs that I don't like, and there are various reasons for that. But I am often surprised by people who won't say no, don't say no. And I can give you a couple of examples where I believe careerism and just simply people just not even thinking about the implications of what they're doing for their jobs caused them to do things that I think were very bad, very harmful. And I, stupidly probably pointed this out. Said, hey, I don't think what you're doing is very good here. And they didn't like it. They really didn't like it. So a friend of mine, once one of my dearest friends, we're estranged now, was prosecuted. He was that was the job. It was a prosecutor, and he was doing I guess they call it a shift. I'm not really sure what the right word was. A tour of duty through narcotics. And so he was prosecuting drug offenders. He was prosecuting sellers. He was prosecuting dealers, prosecuting drug kingpins, and on all sorts of charges. I don't think they did possession, maybe. And I said to him at one point, I said, I really don't think what you're doing is good. I think what you're doing is making things worse. You're creating more chaos, more destabilization in the drug markets, which means there's there's power vacuums because of the arrests, the sweeps that you oversee and conduct. There's more violence in the streets as a result. You're not preventing, if your goal is to keep drugs away from people, you're not succeeding. They're still there. This is not the right thing to do. What you're doing is harmful. I don't think I said it quite that way, but pretty much. And they were really upset. They were angry. They didn't want to hear about it. Their career advancement was based to a significant degree on performing performing well in this tour of duty, being a good prosecutor, bringing in a lot of cases, getting convictions, presenting cases effectively in court, all of which I believed and said was harmful, was bad. It made things worse for people in the city, caused damage. Isn't the goal when you go into practice law? I always thought it was to do good. But, most people, that goes by the wayside pretty quickly. And to be fair to this person, I think he really believed in the drug war. I think this was somebody who has a very, very strong sense of right and wrong and law and order. And you shouldn't violate the law. So I don't think he really, was troubled the way I was. But he didn't want to think about it. He didn't want to say, oh yeah, maybe what I'm doing, maybe this, trying to advance my career or just doing my job well. It's not even careerism necessarily, just being a professional isn't really a good thing. Maybe it's harmful. They didn't want to hear it. And I just remember, people who bring cases that I thought were bad, were harmful, and they just don't want to hear it. And I get it, but I get it intellectually. But for me, it's strange because, in my mind, because what matters is doing the right thing. Of course, I have my own skewed view of what's right, and I often misguided. But I've always thought, well, people want to know what's, that we're all in this kind of together to seek the truth, right? The truth is out there. We're on a quest for it. But a lot of times I think that's wrong. I think a lot of people don't really care about the truth. They just care about making sure that they're okay. And it's so understandable. But it also means we do things, even good people and hardworking people, decent, caring people, act in ways that are very harmful. And another example, so I posted this, I think I discussed this before, but in a Facebook group where I was very, very critical of the current Democratic Party and said, hey, we have to move away from the Democratic Party and we need to move away from groups like Our Revolution because they're doing exactly what Bernie does. They're sheepdogging the left. They're sheep herding us into the Democratic Party. They're saying you can't go off the Democratic Party ranch. You can't support the Green Party. You can't build an alternative party. The farthest left you can go is AOC. The farthest left you can go is Bernie. And I was very, very critical of that position. And I don't, and I made my point clear. And I said, hey, given the Democrats' complicity in Gaza, Ukraine, ever greater inequality, worsening climate, the whole 9 yards, and how Democrats have failed to fight the right battles. And we keep seeing that, right? Over and over, just like with Gavin Newsom, just like with this new Democrat coalition. Their whole attitude is, no, we're fine with Gaza. Trump's wrong on Ukraine. We should be promoting more carnage there. We don't want small dollar donors. We want big dollar donors. No talk of climate change, right? That's today's Democratic Party. We need to move away from it. And that is a popular view among many on the left. More popular, I think, than you know. But the media doesn't tell you about it. The Democratic Party certainly doesn't tell you about it. And many leaders of more progressive or allegedly progressive groups don't want to tell you about it either. Because they have a grift going, which is we support Ro Khanna, we support AOC, we support, Jamal Bowman. And that all goes away if we unite in favor of a Green Party that doesn't take corporate money, that rejects the Democrats. So I post this, I say, hey, this is the problem with the Democrats. They're complicit in all these terrible things. We shouldn't support them. And the response, very, very disappointing by somebody who is actually, at least disappointed me, who has a bit of a career in the Democratic Party. And their criticism is, oh, this isn't the right place to talk about it. And I hate to say it, but I think there's a real element of careerism there. It's like, hey, this is what I do. My life is wrapped up in the Democratic Party. I have a position with the Democratic Party. I'm in Democratic Party leadership to a degree. So I can't even think about the Democratic Party as being part of the problem. It's just beyond where my mind will go. I'm sheepdogging myself. I'm not allowing myself to entertain the idea that the Democrats are the problem or a big part of the problem. And again, it goes back to that love of money as a root of all kinds of evils. Why? Because you're saying, I need to survive. I need to get mine. I need to be successful in my career. And I certainly get there's a line, right? We all need to have enough. We all need and should have and deserve a decent life. But once you get that, then you start wanting more. You're like, hey, like AOC. Well, now I have health care, but I'm still going to keep pushing the Democratic Party's line. I'm not going to take on the party. I'm not willing, as she said she would be when she first ran. Hey, if I'm a one-term congressperson, that's fine. I'm not gonna soft pedal my message, my criticism of the party. And then she immediately soft pedaled it. She likes being in power. She likes having the trappings of a congresswoman. That's great for her, but in the end, it means we're stuck with a system that is always going to leave us hanging, always leave us flat, and ultimately with nothing at all. All right, I'll be back. Well, I don't think I will be back. I meant to tell you this. Did I tell? And there were a couple of things. Did I get to that? I did tell you about, YouTube. Okay, so tomorrow I will probably have a recorded video. I'm going to be recording tonight with Carlos Childs, a friend of the show, Carlos. And I always love talking to Carlos because he is the one person more than any other I tend to really agree with on issues. So that is very, it's nice for me. Let's put it that way. So we'll talk to Carlos this evening, and I'll have that tomorrow for you. I should be down on the Hill protesting the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil, and then Friday the free-for-all, and then next week I'm off, probably for the whole week. Thanks for watching Halitics. Thanks for being part of the program. Anybody who comments, I always appreciate it. And please do share if you can. Please let people know if you like what I'm doing here, that you do like what I'm doing here, because that makes a big difference. I really can see it in the numbers. Just a few comments from viewers, from listeners, from watchers. Just a few comments tend to mean I get a significantly bigger distribution of my videos. All right, I will see you live Friday.